James Carter never thought of himself as a bad person. He always believed he was just someone trying to find his way in life. But deep inside, he knew the truth. He was scared. Scared of responsibilities, scared of commitment, and most of all, scared of being a father. When he married Monica, he truly loved her. She was strong, kind, and always knew how to handle difficult situations. But James was different. He had always been unsure of himself. He changed jobs often, never stayed in one place for too long, and avoided making big decisions. So when Monica told him she was pregnant, his world turned upside down. At first, he tried to act happy. He told himself that he could do this, that he could be a father. But deep down, doubts filled his mind. Would he be a good dad? Would he be able to take care of a family? The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. As the months passed, Monica's belly grew, and so did James's anxiety. He watched her prepare for the baby, buying tiny clothes, decorating the nursery, and reading parenting books. She was excited, full of love and hope. But James, he felt trapped. Every time he looked at her, he saw a future that he wasn't sure he was ready for. One night, as Monica slept peacefully beside him, James lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His heart pounded, and his mind raced. He thought about his own childhood, how his father had struggled to provide, how his parents had fought over money and responsibilities. He didn't want to make the same mistakes. But what if he did? What if he failed? The fear became too much. The next morning, while Monica was out, James packed a small bag. He left a short note on the kitchen table. It wasn't much, just a few words saying he was sorry, that he wasn't ready, and that he needed time. Then, without looking back, he walked out the door. At first, he felt relieved. He told himself he had done the right thing. Maybe Monica was better off without him. Maybe the baby would be better off too. He traveled to another city, got a new job, and tried to start over. He ignored the guilt that sat in the back of his mind, convincing himself that he had no choice. But deep inside, something felt wrong. Every time he saw a family walking in the park or a father playing with his child, a strange feeling rose in his chest. He tried to push it away, but it never left him. And then, months later, everything changed. A phone call, a familiar voice on the other end. James, Monica had the baby. His breath caught. Not one, James. 4. She had quadruplets. His world spun. He had left behind one child, but now there were 4. And just like that, the life he thought he had escaped was about to pull him back in. Let me know if you'd like any changes or improvements. James stood frozen, the phone pressed against his ear. He thought he had misheard. What did you say? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The person on the other end sighed. Monica had the babies. 4 of them. Quadruplets. James felt his knees go weak. His heart pounded so loudly that he could barely hear anything else. He had left, thinking he was running from one responsibility. But now, 4. His mind struggled to process it. He sat down, gripping the edge of his chair. How is she? He finally asked. She's managing, the voice said, but there was something in the tone that made James feel even worse. She's strong, but it's not easy. Raising 4 babies alone, you can imagine how hard it is. James could imagine. He could see Monica, exhausted and overwhelmed, waking up in the middle of the night to feed 4 hungry infants. He pictured her holding them, one in each arm, trying to comfort them all at once. The thought made his chest tighten. He had convinced himself that leaving was the right thing to do. He had believed that Monica would be better off without him. But now, reality hit him like a storm. She wasn't just taking care of herself and one baby. She was raising 4 tiny human beings all on her own. James ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know, he muttered, though he wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. You didn't know because you left. The voice replied, sharp but not unkind. James, you need to face this. These are your children too. James hung up without saying anything else. His hands were shaking. He spent the rest of the night staring at the wall, his thoughts spinning in every direction. A part of him wanted to go back, to get on a bus or a plane and return to Monica. But another part of him was still afraid. What if she didn't want to see him? What if the babies, his babies, grew up hating him? Days passed, and James kept trying to push the thoughts away. He buried himself in work, kept himself busy, but nothing helped. No matter what he did, the image of Monica struggling alone haunted him. Then, one evening, he found himself scrolling through social media. Without meaning to, he typed Monica's name into the search bar. A moment later, her profile appeared. The first picture he saw stopped him cold. It was a photo of Monica in a hospital bed, holding 4 tiny newborns. Despite the exhaustion on her face, she was smiling. The caption read, "My little miracles. The hardest journey of my life, but worth every second." James felt something break inside him. For the first time since he left, he truly understood what he had done. And for the first time, he wondered if it was too late to make things right. Let me know if you'd like any changes or improvements. Monica had always been strong, but nothing in her life had prepared her for this. Raising one child alone was difficult, but raising 4 at the same time, it felt impossible. The days and nights blurred together. From the moment she opened her eyes in the morning to the moment she collapsed in bed at night, she was always moving. Feeding, changing diapers, rocking babies to sleep. Her life had turned into an endless cycle of exhaustion. Sleep became a luxury. The babies woke up at different times, each needing her attention. Just as one would fall asleep, another would start crying. Monica would drag herself out of bed, pick up the tiny bundle in her arms, and whisper soft words to calm them down. She had learned to function on just a few hours of rest, but some nights, the exhaustion was so overwhelming that she found herself crying quietly, not because she was weak, but because she was human. She had no time for herself, no time to eat properly, no time to sit and breathe. There were days when she felt completely alone, like the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. But she never gave up. Her love for her children kept her going. No matter how tired she was, no matter how hard things got, she looked at their tiny faces and reminded herself why she was fighting. These 4 little souls depended on her. She was their mother, their protector, their entire world. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when she wished James had stayed, moments when she felt angry, not just at him, but at life itself. Why did she have to do this alone? Why did the man who helped create these beautiful children get to walk away while she struggled every single day? But she didn't have time to think about that for long. She had mouths to feed, laundry to wash, and bottles to prepare. Her friends and family helped when they could, but she knew this was her fight. She worked multiple jobs, taking on online work late at night while the babies slept. Every extra dollar went toward diapers, formula, and baby clothes. Despite the struggles, there were beautiful moments too. The first time one of the babies smiled at her, she forgot all her pain. The way they reached for her, the way their tiny fingers wrapped around hers, it made everything worth it. And then there were the moments of silence, when all 4 babies were finally asleep, and she could just sit there, watching them, feeling both exhausted and blessed at the same time. She had lost so much, but she had also gained something priceless. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she would never give up on her children. No matter how hard things got, she would keep going. Because that's what a mother does. Let me know if you'd like any changes. James had spent the last few months pretending his past didn't exist. He told himself that leaving was the right decision, that Monica and the babies were better off without him. But no matter how hard he tried to move on, his heart wouldn't let him forget. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Monica's face. He imagined her rocking 4 babies to sleep, struggling to feed them, running on nothing but sheer willpower. And then there was the photo, the one he had found online. The image of Monica in that hospital bed, holding 4 tiny newborns, had burned itself into his mind. He didn't know why, but that picture shook him. One evening, after another long and meaningless day at work, he sat alone in his small apartment, scrolling through his phone. His hands moved almost on their own as he searched for Monica's name again. He found more pictures, photos of the babies as they grew. They were a little older now, sitting up, smiling, reaching for the camera. James stared at their faces, and something inside him cracked. These were his children, his own flesh and blood. And yet, he wasn't there. He had missed everything. Their first smiles, their first giggles, their first moments in the world. He had abandoned them before they even had a chance to know him. A deep sense of guilt washed over him. Then, as he continued scrolling, he found something else, a video. It was a short clip from a charity event. Monica stood on stage, holding a microphone, while the crowd clapped for her. She looked tired but determined. A banner behind her read, "Celebrating Strong Mothers." James pressed play. "I won't lie," Monica said in the video, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Raising quadruplets alone is the hardest thing I have ever done. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, wondering how I would manage. But I did, and I will keep doing it because my children deserve the best." The audience clapped, and Monica smiled, but there was something in her eyes, a pain James recognized. It was the look of someone who had been forced to be strong because she had no choice. James swallowed hard. She had done everything on her own. She had survived without him. But did that mean she didn't need him at all? For the first time in years, James allowed himself to ask the question he had been avoiding. Could he go back? Would Monica even let him? Would his children ever forgive him? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear: he couldn't keep running. Because no matter how far he went, his past would always catch up with him. And this time, maybe it was time to stop running and face it. Let me know if you need any changes. James had never been more nervous in his life. As he stood outside Monica's house, his hands trembled. It had been years since he had last seen her, and now he was about to face the woman he had abandoned. He had no idea what he would say or how she would react. But one thing was certain: he had to try. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. For a moment, there was no sound. Then footsteps approached. The door opened, and there she was, Monica. She looked different from the last time he had seen her. There was exhaustion in her eyes, but there was also strength. The moment she saw him, her expression changed. First, shock. Then, anger. "What are you doing here?" she asked, crossing her arms. James swallowed hard. I know I don't deserve to be here, but I had to come." Monica shook her head, disbelief written all over her face. "After all these years, you just decide to show up. Do you think you can just walk back into our lives like nothing happened?" James lowered his eyes. He had expected this. He knew she wouldn't welcome him with open arms. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. I just want a chance to make things right." Monica let out a bitter laugh. "Make things right," she repeated. "James, do you have any idea what I've been through? What your children have been through?" James winced at the words. Your children. He had no right to call them his. Not yet. "I know I messed up," he admitted. "I was scared. I was weak. And I ran. But I regret it every single day." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I don't want to run anymore." Monica studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "You don't just get to come back and expect things to be okay." "I know," James said quickly. "I don't expect that. I just want to see them." At that, Monica hesitated. For years, she had raised the children without him. She had been their mother and father, their protector, their everything. Did James really deserve to see them after what he had done? But as much as she wanted to slam the door in his face, a small part of her knew the truth. Her children had a father, whether she liked it or not. And maybe, just maybe, they deserved the chance to decide for themselves. She let out a deep breath. "They're in the backyard," she finally said. "But I swear, James, if you hurt them, even a little, I will never let you near them again." James nodded, his heart pounding. "I understand." Taking a shaky step inside, he prepared himself to meet his children for the first time, and he prayed they wouldn't hate him. "Let me know if you'd like any changes." James followed Monica through the house, his heart beating faster with every step. He had imagined this moment so many times, but now that it was actually happening, fear gripped him. What if his children didn't want to see him? What if they looked at him and saw nothing but a stranger? Monica stopped at the back door, placing her hand on the knob. She turned to him, her expression serious. "They don't know you," she said. "I never lied to them, but I never filled their heads with false hope either, so don't expect them to run into your arms." James nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I understand." With that, Monica pushed the door open. The backyard was filled with laughter. 4 little children, 2 boys and 2 girls, were playing in the grass. One of the boys was chasing a butterfly, while the other 3 were building something out of sticks. James felt his chest tighten. These were his children, his own flesh and blood, and yet they had no idea who he was. Monica called out, "Kids, come here for a second." The children looked up. Slowly, they ran over, their small faces filled with curiosity. "Who's that?" one of the girls asked, pointing at James. Monica took a deep breath. "This is James," she said carefully. He's your father." The words hit James like a wave. Father. He had abandoned that title long ago, but hearing it now made it real again. The children exchanged glances. One of the boys, the tallest of the 4, frowned. "You mean the dad from the pictures?" Monica nodded. "Yes." Silence filled the air. James didn't know what to say. He had dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, words failed him. Finally, one of the girls stepped forward. She had bright, curious eyes. "Why weren't you here before?" she asked. James felt his stomach sink. How could he possibly explain his cowardice to a child? He knelt down to her level, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "Because I made a mistake," he said softly. "And I was scared. But I regret it every single day." The girl tilted her head, studying him. "Are you still scared?" James let out a shaky breath. "A little," he admitted, "but not enough to run away again." The other children watched, their faces unreadable. James didn't expect them to trust him right away. He didn't expect anything, really. Then the girl in front of him did something unexpected. She reached out and touched his face, as if trying to understand him. "You look like me," she whispered. James felt his throat tighten. He nodded. "Yeah, I guess I do." For the first time in years, hope flickered inside him. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Let me know if you'd like any changes." James had never felt so nervous in his life. He sat on the grass in the backyard, surrounded by the 4 little faces that were staring at him with curiosity. He wanted to say something, to make them feel comfortable, but he didn't know where to start. One of the boys, the one who had asked about the pictures, finally spoke. "So, where have you been?" His voice was small, but there was something strong in his tone. James swallowed hard. How could he answer that? How could he tell them he had run away because he was scared? He looked at Monica for help, but she remained silent, waiting to see what he would say. Taking a deep breath, he looked back at his children. "I was far away," he admitted, "and I wasn't brave enough to come back sooner. But I'm here now. And I want to get to know you, if you'll let me." The children exchanged glances. James could see the questions in their eyes. Could they trust him? Did they even want to? The little girl who had touched his face earlier sat beside him and asked, "What's your name again?" James smiled softly. "James." She frowned. "That doesn't sound like Daddy." His heart ached at her words. He knew he hadn't earned that title yet. He didn't deserve it. "You don't have to call me that," he said gently. "Not until you want to." There was a brief silence. Then the tallest boy spoke again. "If you want to know us, what do you even know about kids?" James let out a small, nervous laugh. "Not much," he admitted, "but I'd like to learn." The children stared at him for a moment. Then one of the boys stood up, hands on his hips. "All right," he said. "We'll test you." James blinked. "Test me?" The boy nodded. "Yeah. If you're gonna be here, you need to know what we like. If you pass, maybe we can talk more." James glanced at Monica, who simply raised an eyebrow as if to say good luck. He turned back to his children and nodded. "Okay, I'm ready." The first question came quickly. "What's my favorite color?" asked one of the girls. James bit his lip. Pink." She shook her head. "Nope, it's blue." The next child asked, "What's my favorite animal?" James guessed, "A lion." The boy crossed his arms. "Wrong. It's a dolphin." James laughed, feeling a little more at ease. "Okay, I'm terrible at this, but I promise, if you give me a chance, I'll learn everything about you." The children exchanged glances again. Finally, the little girl grinned. "Okay," she said, "but you have to play with us first." James smiled. "Deal." And for the first time in years, he felt like he belonged. "Let me know if you'd like any changes." James never thought he would feel at home again, but as he sat in the backyard playing with his children, something inside him softened. He had expected them to push him away, to refuse to speak to him. But instead, they had given him a chance. Small, but a chance nonetheless. The game started simply. They wanted to see if he could run as fast as them, jump as high, and even play their favorite hide-and-seek game. James, though completely out of practice, gave it his best effort. He ran after them, laughing as they darted across the yard. At first, Monica watched from a distance, her arms crossed. She wasn't ready to trust him yet. He had left once. What if he did it again? But as she saw the way the children smiled, how their laughter filled the air, she realized something surprising. They were happy. For the first time, they were seeing the part of themselves that had been missing. Later that evening, when the sun started to set, James sat with the children on the porch. They were exhausted from playing, their little bodies leaning against him. One of the boys, the quietest of the four, finally spoke. "Are you gonna leave again?" he asked softly. James's chest tightened. He had expected this question, but it still hurt. He shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not leaving again." The little boy looked up at him, his face serious. "You promise?" James took a deep breath. This wasn't just a word to say lightly. He had broken too many promises before. But this time, he meant it. "I promise," he whispered. Monica, standing near the doorway, heard his words. She wasn't sure if she could believe him, but something about the way he held their children made her pause. Later that night, as she put the kids to bed, she found James still sitting on the porch. He looked up at her, nervous. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he admitted, "but I want to be here. Not just for them, but for you too." Monica sighed, crossing her arms. "James, it's not that simple." "I know," he said quickly, "and I don't expect things to go back to how they were, but I want to prove to you that I changed." She studied him for a long moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "They love you," she said, "but love isn't enough. If you want to be in their lives, you have to show up, every single day." James nodded. "I will." Monica didn't say anything else, but for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, James really was ready to stay this time. And if he was, their story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Let me know if you'd like any changes.